Good morning to all. I'm Dr. A Prabhavathy, Assistant Professor, PG and Research Department of History, Sri Sarda College for Women, Autonomous, Salem 16. Today see the topic um, George Washington 1732 to 1799. First introduction. George Washington 1732 to 99 was Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War 1775 to 83 and served two times as the first US President from 1789 to 1797. The son of a prosperous planter, Washington was raised in colonial Virginia. As a young man, he worked as a surveyor then fought in the French and Indian War 1755 to 63. During the American Revolution, he led the colonies' force to victory over the British and became a national hero. In 1787, he was elected president of the convention that wrote the US Constitution. 2 years later, Washington became America's first president, realizing that the way he handled the job would impact how future presidents approached the position. He handed down a legacy of strength, integrity of national purpose. Less than 3 years after leaving office, he died at his Virginia plantation, Mount Vernon, at age 67. George Washington early life. George Washington was born on February 22nd, 1732, at his family's plantation on Pope's Grapes in Westmoreland Country, in the British colony of Virginia, to Augustine Washington 1694 to 1743, and his second wife Mary Wall Washington 1708 to 89. George, the eldest of Augustine and Mary Washington, six children, spent much of his childhood at Ferry Farm, a plantation near Fredericksburg, Virginia. After Washington's father died when he was 11, it is likely he helped his mother manage the plantation. Few details about Washington's early education are known. Although the children of prosperous families like his typically were taught at home by private tutor as attended private school. It is believed he finished his formal schooling at around of age 15. As a teenager, Washington, who had shown of aptitude for mathematics, became a successful surveyor. His survey expeditions into Virginia wilderness earned him enough money to become acquiring land of his own. In 1751, Washington made his only trip outside of America when he traveled to Fairport with his older half-brother Lawrence Washington 1780-52, who was suffering from tuberculosis and hoped the warm climate would help him recuperate. Shortly after their arrival, George contracted smallpox. He survived, although the illness left his will permanent facial scar. In 1752, Lawrence, who had been educated in England and served as a Washington's mentor, died. Washington eventually encouraged Lawrence's estate, Mount Vernon, on the Potomac River near Alexandria, Virginia. As gentleman farmer. Is December in December 1752, Washington Washington, who had no previous military experience, was made a commander no previous military experience, was made a commander of the Virginia militia. He saw action in the French and Indian War and was eventually but in charge of all of Virginia's military forces. By 1759, Washington had raised his commissions, returned to Mount Vernon, and was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses, where he served until 1774. In January 1759, he married Martha Dancherskirst, 1731, 1802, a wealthy widow with two children. Washington became a devoted stepfather to her children. He and Martha Washington never had any offspring of their own. In the ensuing years, Washington expanded Mount Vernon from 2,000 acres into an 8,000 acres prosperity with a few farms. He grew a variety of the crops, including wheat and corn, with maintenance fruits arch and a successful fishery. He was deeply interested in farming and constantly experimented with new crops and methods of land conservation. George Washington, the American Revolution. Washington provided to be a better general than military structures. His strength lay not in his genius on the battlefield, but in his ability to keep the colony army together. His troops were poorly trained and lacked food, ammunition, and other supplies. However, Washington was able to give them direction and motivation. His leadership during the winter of 1777-1788, the Valley Fort, was a testament to his power inspired his men to keep going. By the later 1760, Washington had experimented finish the effect the rise taxes imposed on American colonists by the British and come into believed that it was in best interest of the colonists and declared independence from England. Washington served as a delegate to the First Continental Congress in 1774 in Philadelphia. By the time the Second Continental Congress convened years later, the American Revolution had become in earnest, and Washington was named Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Over the course of the crueling 8 Years' War, the colonial force won few battles but consistently held their own against the British. In October 1781, with the aid of the French, who allied themselves with the colonists over the revolt the British. The Continental force were able to capture British troops under General Charles Cornwallis 1780, 1738 to 1805 in the Battle of Egton. This action effectively ended the Revolutionary War, and Washington was declared the national hero. America's first president. In 1783, with the signing of the Treaty of Paris between Great Britain and the US, Washington, believing he had done his duty, gave up his command of the army and returned to Mount Vernon, intent of resuming his life as a gentleman, farmer, and family man. However, in 1787, he was asked to attend the Constitution Convention, the Philadelphia, and head the committee to draft to new constitution. His impressive leadership there convinced the delegates that he was by the most qualified man to become the nation's first president. At first, Washington begged. He wanted to, at last, return to quit life at home and leave governing the new nation to others. But public opinion was so strong that eventually he gave in. The first presidential election was held on January 7, 1789, and Washington won handle John Adams 1735 to 1826, who received the second large number of votes, became the national first vice president. The 15 years old Washington was inaugurated on April 30, 1789 in New York City. Because Washington, D.C., America's future capital city, was ill built. He lived in New York and Philadelphia. While in office, he signed a bill establishing a future permanent U.S. capital along the Potomac River. The city later named Washington, D.C. in his honor. George Washington accomplishments. The United States was a small nation when Washington took office, consists of 11 states and approximately 4 million people, and there was no percentage of for how the new president should conduct domestic or foreign business. Mindful that his actions would likely determine how future presidents were expected to govern, Washington worked hard to set an example of fairness, tolerance, and integrity in foreign matters. He supported ordinary relations with other countries but also favored a position a neutrality of foreign conflicts. Domestically, he nominated the first Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, John J. 1745 to 1829, signed a bill establishing the first national bank, the Bank of the United States, and set up his own presidential cabinet. His two most prominent cabinet appointees were Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson (1743 to 1826) and Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton (1755 to 1804), two men who disagreed strongly on the role of the federal government. Hamilton Hamilton favored a strong central Hamilton favored a strong central government and was part of the Federalist Party, while Jefferson favored stronger states' rights as a part of Democratic Republic Party, a forerunner to the Domestic Party. Washington believed that divergent views were critical for the health of the new government, but he was distrusted at what he saw as an emerging potential. George Washington's presidency was marked by a series of firsts. He signed the first United States copyright law, protecting the copyrights of authors. He also signed the first Thanksgiving proclamation, making November 26th a national day Thanksgiving for the end of the War of American Independence and the successful ratification of the Constitution. During Washington's presidency, Congress passed the first federal revenue law, a tax on distilled spirits, in July 1794. Farmer in western Pennsylvania rebelled over the son called whiskey tax. Washington called in over 12,000 militiamen to Pennsylvania to dissolve the Whiskey Rebellion in one of the first major tests of the authority of the national government. Under Washington leadership, the state ratified the Bill of Rights and a few new states entered the Union: North Carolina, Rhode Island, Vermont, Kentucky, and Tennessee. In his second term, Washington issued the Proclamation of Neutrality to avoid enter the 1793 war between Great Britain and France. But when French minister to the United States, Edmund Charles Kennedy, known to history as Citizen Senate, turned to the United States, he bold proclamations attempt to set up America both as French military forces and gain support for his cause in western United States. His melting cost of the stick between Federalist and domestic Republican built the rift between parties and making concerns building more difficult. In 1795, Washington signed the Treaty of Amity, Commerce and Navigation between His Britannic Majesty and the United States of America, a Jay's Treaty, so named for John Jay, who had negotiated it with the government of King George XIII. It helped the US wide war with Great Britain, but also rankled certain members of Congress back home and was fiercely opposed by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. Internationally, it caused a stir among the French, who believed it violated previous treaties between the United States and France. Washington's administration signed two other influential international treaties: Binkley Treaty of 1795, also known as the Treaty of San Lorenzo, established a friendly relationship between the United States and Spain, firming up borders between the US and Spanish territories in North America and opinion up the Mississippi to America traders. The Treaty of Tripoli, signed the following years, gave America ships access to Mediterranean shipped lands in exchange for a yearly tribute to the Pass of Tripoli. George Washington, retirement of Mount Vernon. In the 1796 after two term as president and declined to serve a third term. Washington finally retired. In Washington farewell address, he urged the new nation to maintain the highest standard domestically and to keep involvement with the foreign powers to a minimum. The address is still uh, read each February in the US Senate to commemorate Washington's birthday. Washington returned to Mount Vernon and devoted his attentions to making the plantation as productive as he's been before he became president. More than four decades of the public service had aged him, but he was still under commanding figures. In December 1799, he got a good after inspecting his prosperity in the rain. He got developed into root infection, and Washington died on a night of December 14, 1799, at the age of 67. He was entombed at Mount Vernon, which in 1960 was designed a National Historic Landmark. Washington left one of the most enduring legacies of any American history, known as the father of his country. His face appears on the US dollar bill and quarters and don- dozens more of US schools, towns, and counties, as well as the state Washington and the national capital city, are named for him.